Hello and welcome to the inaugural Reuters events Transform Europe 2020 virtual event. This Transform Energy and Carbon is our concluding part in our Transforming series live broadcasts. The concluding parts of this series will be a number of webinars and workshops in November and December, focusing on biodiversity, nature-based solutions and climate resilience. Do get in contact with my colleague Alexia Croft if you'd like to learn more or to be involved. But let's bring it back to the here and now. Over the next 2 days, we'll be bringing some exclusive case studies, business critical discussions on the need and opportunity for business to help lead the energy transition. The challenge ahead, moving the world behind a net zero system, will take decades. But the work and ambition shown now will be what we will see delivered in the next 5 to 10 years. So it's imperative we identify new technologies, innovative strategies, and potential new partners to help raise the bar for all. And I aim today and tomorrow to help you and your peers on that quest. I hope you're sitting comfortably. I hope you have a coffee or a tea as we dive straight in. And our opening keynote discussion, it's a Reuters News fireside discussion where we have Dr. Fatih Birol, Executive Director of the International Energy Agency, talking with Matthew Green, Climate Change Correspondent at Reuters, talking to how we deliver a green, clean form of rebuild in the midst of the global pandemic. This session is live and we want to encourage you to get involved. So do post your questions through the chat box using the Q&A on the right to this feed. And now it's my pleasure to hand over to Matthew to get this first session underway.
Dr. Birol, a very warm welcome to Transform. It's great to have you with us. I know it's an exceptionally busy moment at the International Energy Agency as you're no doubt preparing or presumably putting the finishing touches on the World Energy Outlook, which we're waiting for in a couple of weeks' time. So thank you for breaking away from that for a few minutes to join us. Now, you came out very early calling for governments to seize the chance to use their post-pandemic stimulus packages to speed up the shift to a low-carbon future. In June, IEA produced a major report exploring the benefits of renewable energy, energy efficiency, research and development, a veritable blueprint for a green recovery. And we spoke back in April, and you said, this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity. We mustn't repeat the mistakes we made after the 2008 financial crisis when emissions dipped, then very quickly rebounded. It's now the end of September. How far do you think governments are listening?
So thank you very much, Mr. Green, and to Reuters for inviting me to this debate. So we have seen up to now more than 10 trillion US dollars equivalent of the economic recovery packages were put in place. And our analysis show that there is a significant amount of countries who did follow the path we put on the table. What was it? Our plan, the Sustainable Recovery Plan, we in fact put it together with the IMF, working closely with IMF. It was mapping out an economic strategy that would help to a global economy to rebound, create jobs, but as you also mentioned, to put the emissions in a structural decline after this year. Some countries are doing excellent, such as Europe, Canada, Korea, Japan, and some others I hope will follow soon. But if I tell you that there is a huge, overwhelming number of countries following this advice, I would be rather on the too optimistic side. But I am still waiting others to come on board, such as the ones we recently heard from China.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. It was an extraordinary announcement, wasn't it, last week from President Xi that China is now going to aim for net zero carbon emissions by 2060. That caught a lot of observers by surprise. How significant do you think that announcement is?
Now, I should tell you something that you had Reuters had a long-standing reporter in Brussels. I forgot her name, an very able reporter in Brussels for many, many years. And in the year 2016, during a meeting, I had a coffee with her. And I told her one of the findings of our World Energy Outlook, the preliminary findings, which is China became 2006, China became the #1 emitter of the world. China is, and it went everywhere through Reuters, as it always does. So since 15 years, China is the #1 emitter of the world, and today emits 25% of the global CO2. Now, this is a historical, of course, announcement, very significant, but at the IEA, we are a number of people. We want to see how this, the peak within this decade in China will take place. What are the legs to reach there? And therefore, we'll be following this very closely. And I believe one of the first proofs of how serious China is will be the very soon to be published next 5 years plan. So if this plan really puts emphasis on the clean energy technologies, and here solar and wind alone are not enough, I want to underline this, we will be very happy to see, because it will have transformative implications for the global energy markets.
It was back in 2015, wasn't it? We saw this convergence between China and the United States coming together, enabling the forging of the Paris Agreement. Now, of course, politics looks very different in 2020 to how it did back then. And we've seen in the States, a lot of money has been going into bailing out or supporting fossil fuel dominated industries in the wake of the pandemic. I think latest figures from Energy Policy Tracker are saying something like $72 billion have been committed in the US to unconditional support for fossil fuels versus only about 26 billion for clean energies. How significant do you think the November presidential election will be for the future of the global emissions trajectory and therefore hopes of containing climate change?
I think the US elections will have implications beyond energy and climate, and everything almost around the world, US being the strongest global economic power of the world. But I would again stick to our numbers. It will be surprising for you, maybe, Mr. Green and many of the colleagues, but 2019 and 2020, 2 years in a row, the largest reductions in global emissions came from the United States. So we like it or not, these are the numbers. Of course, can US do more? Definitely. Can US be a leader of the global energy transitions, clean energy transitions? Definitely. So therefore, the US politics will matter more. And I can tell you that regardless of which political party, political position, on 9th of July this year, only 2 months ago, we organized a global clean energy transition summit and invited 40 ministers. We told the ministers, and I have my invitation letter, we are having a global clean energy transition summit. Would you like to come? US Secretary of Energy was there, so was the Chinese minister, so was the European ministers, Japanese and others. So many countries pushing the clean energy transitions, not only because of addressing the climate change, this is very important, but some countries do it to reduce the air pollution, and some others, in addition to this, are doing it in order to have a pole position in the clean, green energy industry of the future. So it may well be a part of the industry policy of those countries as well.
We are in this extraordinary moment, aren't we? I mean, we were already in the midst, certainly at the beginnings of an absolutely epic energy transition. We could see the signs of that accelerating all around in terms of the rollout of solar energy, wind energy that the IEA flagged in a big report not long ago. And now we're seeing these extraordinary announcements coming from companies like BP, arguing that fossil fuel, or certainly oil demand, will have peaked by 2030, far faster than the industry was projecting just a year or so ago. We've seen this forecasting coming from DNV in Norway, big energy services firm, saying that we think oil demand peaked in 2019. I mean, it would have been very hard to imagine that we would have been having a conversation like this even a year ago. And yet here we are. Dr. Birol, do you think we are now essentially living through the beginning of the end of the fossil fuel era?
I think we will see definitely the share of fossil fuels in the global energy mix will decline. Our numbers show that, and this is what we have to see if we were to reach our climate goals. And IEA will be leading definitely this the battle. Having said that, now 2 points I want to take here. One is the peak oil. Now, I believe this discussion, even though the peak oil, it is just 2 words and very easily formulated, everybody can understand, it is not the key topic here. If it is not 100 million barrels per day, if it's 99, so it doesn't matter much, or it is 101 million barrels per day, it doesn't matter much. The issue is here, the reason why oil is down today is not because of new technologies, is not because of the government have very strong, many governments around the world have new policies. It is because of the pandemic and economic crisis. So if the governments do not have the right policies, with the rebound of the economy, oil demand will go back where it was, even maybe beyond that. So therefore, we talk about the human, how to say, behavioral changes, teleworking and so on, but these are very small when you look at the big picture of the oil consumption. Teleworking will not bring us to our climate goals, but right government policies might well do that. So when we look at the numbers, the biggest growth in oil demand comes from the petrochemical industry. How are we going to deal with petrochemical industry? So we need to push new technologies. And Mr. Green, I have to give some sobering facts here, unfortunately. In order to reach the 2050 net zero goals, the emission reductions to reach there need to come from technologies. 50% of those emission reductions need to come from technologies which are not commercially viable yet. So if I have to repeat, the 50% of the emission reductions to reach the net zero goals in 2050 need to come from technologies which are not commercially viable yet. So therefore, in my view, the governments need to be in the driving seat to push these technologies, critical technologies, such as the hydrogen, such as carbon capture and storage, such as electric cars, very strongly. Otherwise, if we leave everything to the markets, I am not sure that we will be able to reach our climate goals.
I'm curious in this discussion around technology, whether that's obviously part of the solution. There needs to be new technologies to enable the transition to a low carbon economy. And at the same time, we have this existing fossil fuel complex, which is producing far, far more oil, natural gas, coal than is compatible, certainly with 1.5 degrees target in Paris, and with 2 degrees. We're currently on course for more like 3 to 4 degrees of warming. What are we going to do to start dismantling this fossil fuel complex, winding it down? People talk about managed decline before it tips us into a situation where climate change becomes so runaway climate change, essentially, that it's just impossible to control? What can be done to put the industry on that glide path to decline?
So this is I think, the question in my view, on the climate change debate. So let me try to explain my view in simple terms. In my view, as world, as the people who deal with these issues, we all have two jobs. Job number one, whatever we are building in terms of energy, power plants, the industry facilities, I don't know, the trucks, whatever energy using equipments, they should be all sustainable. More solar, more wind, electric cars, etc. This is one part of the issue. The second part, which is often not discussed, but in my view, as important as the first job, is we have a huge existing energy using infrastructure, power plants, huge amount of power plants around the world, iron, steel, aluminium, petrochemical, trucks. What are we going to do with them? Because if they were to operate in line with the normal operation times, 20 years, 30 years, they are very, very young, by the way, especially in Asia, China being one of them. The biggest chunk of our carbon budget will be already eaten up. Even if we do the job number one perfectly, all the new ones, projects are sustainable, clean, we have no chance to reach our target. So what do we need to do? And most of them are run by fossil fuels. We have to do at least two things. We can do two things. One, new technologies. Here, carbon capture and storage, in my view, is a critical technology. Not because I am in love with carbon capture and storage. I am not in love with any of the technologies. But we need CCS in order to address some of these heavy industries or trucks or aviation and others. You cannot use solar and wind for iron, steel, for chemicals, for the others, because they need the high temperature. And you can get only with fossil fuels, but then the issue is using carbon capture and storage. And I am very happy to report you that I see a strong interest in carbon capture and storage. Just this morning, I published an op-ed with the Prime Minister of Norway, Mrs. Solberg, how the momentum with the numbers in the carbon capture and storage growing. So therefore, we have to either retire early some of the existing infrastructure or retrofit this with the new technologies coming. These have to be, both of them have to be chosen depending on the country's policies and financial positioning. But if we don't do that, no chance whatsoever. Forget 1.5, forget even 2. We have to look at different options.
Now, we've spoken about this before, but since the start of last year, the IEA itself has come under some pressure from investor groups such as the Institutional Investor Group on Climate Change, climate scientists, campaign organizations, the former UN climate chief, Christiana Figueres. They've been calling on you to actually change the way you produce the World Energy Outlook. Obviously, the flagship publication comes out every year. It's very widely watched in energy markets all around the world. And I've spoken to many companies, or I've seen presentations where fossil fuel executives point to the World Energy Outlook to say we need to build more oil fields, more pipelines, dig more coal mines to satisfy the demand that we see projected in these scenarios. So at some level, the World Energy Outlook is being used to justify more and more of this unsustainable investment. Now, that kind of coalition that I just mentioned has been saying, look, can you produce a 1.5 degree scenario that will help guide investment in such a way that we can avoid the most catastrophic outcomes from climate change and put that right front and center of the world energy outlook. What a powerful signal that would send to the investor community that the world is now pivoting onto a 1.5 degree pathway, that these investments in more production that is just not compatible with climate goals are just simply not on the table anymore. Will the IEA meet those calls in the next WEO? Can we expect to see a 1.5 degree scenario central to the report?
So thank you very much, Mr. Green, for this question. In fact, it is your standing question to me. Thank you very much for that. So I wish you were telling the truth, that all these companies were basing their decision on the findings of the World Energy Outlook. I am not sure it is true, but I wish it was true. Because in the World Energy Outlook, there are different scenarios. It is up to the companies to choose the scenario they want. For example, Mr. Green may choose the black scenario, or Mr. Brown can choose the green scenario. There can be different options there. And what makes the World Energy Outlook the most credible and most full of energy publication of the world is that are being objective and stick to numbers, not look at the tweets, letters, and so on. We are going to release our next World Energy Outlook on 13th of October, only a few weeks from now. What kind of scenarios we put in this World Energy Outlook, it is this scenario or that scenario, we will announce on 13th of October. But I can tell you that we follow the debate. We are always ahead of the curve, and it is the reason which makes the World Energy Outlook, not the other publications that some of the colleagues are working on, the most credible energy publication of the world. And as a proud co-worker of the World Energy Outlook, I wanted to mention this.
Can we expect any surprises in next month?
Always wait surprises from us. Otherwise, the life will be boring for the journalists. We want to make your life colorful. Not
well, yeah. There's no chance of that with you, Dr. Birol. I mean, one of the other things that's been mooted in the US is the idea of a kind of inverse OPEC. Kamala Harris, I think, obviously Democrat candidate Joe Biden's running mate, suggested the idea of countries gathering together rather than talking about supply cuts, talking about how we're actually going to wind the oil industry down. Would the IEA be ready to support something, an initiative along those lines?
Now, I don't know how the US elections will end up and what will be the next administration's energy policies. But when it comes to oil industry, I have two red lines. One, I don't agree that as of tomorrow, we will not need any more oil. During this lockdown periods, the trucks brought green vegetables to the markets by using oil products. The petrochemical industry produced the masks or the sanitizers we use. This is one red line. We cannot go from one day to another no oil world. The second red line I have is that climate challenge is a challenge that the oil industry has to be in a constructive side. How can they do this? They can be a part of the carbon capture storage, hydrogen. They can help to offshore technologies, including offshore wind. They have to be a part of this solution. Otherwise, I can tell you that no oil company will be unaffected from clean energy transitions. It can be US, Europe, Asia, wherever we are talking about.
Yeah, and it does seem to me that what we're witnessing now is almost, we don't have a map for it, do we? We couldn't have imagined, well, some might say we should have imagined that a pandemic would arrive at any moment, but the idea that it would have such a enormous impact on demand for energy and potentially accelerating the transition, it's just thrown so many of our existing maps and forecasts into the waste bin, basically. I wonder if you could kind of look ahead. What do you think we should be looking out for? We've obviously talked about possible new technologies. What other surprises do you think might be in store? Do you think that this transition could go quicker, perhaps, than a lot of people are expecting? Or are you still advising us to remain cautious?
No, I am, to be honest with you, even in this grim year, I am more optimistic than ever about the clean energy future. I have at least 3 reasons. One, the cost of solar and wind, offshore wind, is plummeting. In the last 1.5 years, it is going so cheap that the solar in many parts of the world is becoming the cheapest source of new electricity generation, cheaper than everything. Second, more and more governments and companies are stepping up their efforts very strongly. And third, innovation, the pace of innovation is stronger, especially for CCUS and hydrogen. If I have to simplify it, I believe the batteries and electrolyzers today are there where solar was 10 years ago. But this will be not happening perhaps without any problems. There will be a lot of challenges for different companies. I can tell you different countries. As somebody said, a revolution is not a bed of roses. There will be a lot of difficulties coming from here. And, but at the end of the day, I am much more optimistic today than before in terms of the clean energy transitions, because of the many technologies are getting cheaper. More and more governments and the companies are committing themselves, and innovation is now faster. And this is happening, Mr. Green, not only because of the companies and governments want to help to address the climate change, but they also want to have a good position for themselves in the clean energy technology revolution and industrial policy.
Well, thank you, Dr. Birol. I guess we can only wait and see as to how quickly this transition is going to unfold. Hopefully we'll get some more clues next month when the World Energy Outlook is released. We'll be looking forward to reading that and seeing what surprises might be in store. And I hope that we'll have a chance to speak about these issues again before too much time passes. Thank you very much for joining us today at Transform.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Fatih. One insightful and inspiring. Thank you all for all the questions that you've submitted as well. We'll continue in this vein throughout the day. So keep submitting your questions. And we are also running a poll across the 2 days, so do submit your feedback through there as well. That's just beneath the fold. Next up, we have Jonas Persson, who is the MD of Sustainability and Head of Energy and Utilities at Lloyds. And he'll be talking with Mike Scott, who's the founder of Carbon Copy Communications and a long-standing contributor to the Ethical Corporation magazine. They are talking to the need and the implications of realigning the capital markets behind a net zero future. Here's that 15-minute discussion.